Last but not least for the Power Hour lunch presentations is the illustrious Sally Lee, who is the Executive Director of the Canadian Independent Screen Fund for BIPOC creators. And she sits on so many boards. And I also hear that you are in a rock band, and so has been an advocate and leader and, wielding a machete and probably a guitar for many years. I'm going to guess a guitar. And she's going to use the last kind of 15 minutes that we have in the session before we get kicked out for the keynote prep to talk about the $20 million fund that she's been developing and, ending on a high note of something that I think a lot of people are interested in today, a fund for us, by us.
Thank you, Hannah. I'm so pleased to be here today. Let's see. Oh, okay. I want to thank, in addition to Hannah, Barb, Brian, and the rest of the team at RISO. This is an incredible event, and I've met so many new young people who, for them, I get the feeling that this is a bit of an awakening in terms of feeling a sense of solidarity and realizing that the tree that they're working on is actually part of a forest. It's so valuable to have us all convene in this way. One thing that somebody said was kind of talking about this event, saying, oh, well, it's just going to be a bunch of people, preaching to the choir and stuff like that. And my immediate thought was, well, actually, it's that we're all a choir that we've memorized the repertoire and we're ready to sing and make some music happen. So we're like the kinds of events that Barb was talking about earlier, where we're kind of a sidebar or that kind of thing, and then having to re-explain things to people and advocate or whatever. This conference we're starting the discussion from here. And so I love that Barb was telling us, okay, let's stay action focused on next steps and forward thinking. So thank you for that. And this is the perfect instance of the FUBU concept of for us, by us. It's funny, when I came on board, people were saying, oh, FUBU, and I thought, oh, isn't that like a 90s streetwear brand or something like that? And then I realized, okay, yes, it is, and it meant for us, by us. So anyways, moving along. So the Canadian Independent Screen Fund for BIPOC creators. So this $20 million figure, I will say that when I came on board about a year and a half ago, the number that I was quoted was $10 million. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. But then sitting down and we kind of, laid out what that might look like, quickly realizing, you know what, in the end, $10 million is not that much to ask for in the big scheme of things. And in that, the theme of working from a perspective of abundance rather than scarcity, let's ask for what we really want, not for what we think we can get, not have our hat in our hands. Let's say this is the program we've designed, and this is what we need to fund it. So I am going to try to avoid just reading the background because of the time, and so I'll just keep my remarks more anecdotal. So a big part of our fund, I was excited to see, Tanya, you had your board up there, and I realized, oh shit, I should have done something like that. My board is incredible. We have people from across the country working at so many BIPOC-led organizations. This was baked into the concept of CISF from the very beginning, was that we were gonna be cross-country, and we were gonna have people who have been on the front lines and behind the scenes for decades working at BIPOC-led organizations or for themselves as creators, as Hannah put it, machete wielders, and people who've been doing it for decades. So Kadon is one of my board members, Barb is one of my board members, Tanya is one of our trusted advisors. We work together all the time. Let's see here. Oops, next one. Okay, so this is part of a larger slide presentation that I usually do. This is information that, again, we all know, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but what I will do is I'll say that there are several studies led by many groups, including Racial Equity Media Fund, Doc Institute, the Black Screen Office, and of course, RISO. And I will highly recommend that you all go to the website of another group called Creatives Empowered, which is based in Saskatchewan. They have a single page that is full of links to these and many other surveys. So that's Creatives Empowered. So if you Google them, they'll have a page of resources and with links, with so many studies for the data that backs up what we already know based on our lived experience. There's an upcoming report on creative producers that the Doc Institute put together, and one of their top key findings was specifically around a fund, specifically around supporting CISF as a FUBU fund. Let's see here. So the CISF is a reboot of a longstanding fund called the CIFVF. For those of you of a particular vintage in the room, you might recall the Canadian Independent Film and Video Fund, which operated from the late 90s into the 2000s. And it was a first-in funder. It had a history of supporting projects which did not have a broadcast license attached, which at the time was a trigger in order to be eligible for lots of other kinds of funding. So guess what that meant? Because we didn't require that at the time, we got a lot of the projects which were shut out of the existing system. So guess what? That meant a lot of racialized creators. So we come by our mandate honestly in terms of recognizing that there are structural barriers that exist and need to be addressed. We want to do things differently. We want to create as low barrier as possible while balancing it with the need in terms of being responsible and having oversight around public money. So at the same time, we take our cue from our colleagues at the Indigenous Screen Office. I talk to Carrie Swanson there all the time. Her take is that she's trying to get away from being a gatekeeper, and she's always looking for ways to say yes rather than no. So, you know, for instance, the Rogers BSO Fund, which we administer right now, we have our guidelines and things like that, but we get inquiries all the time about people who are kind of in the cracks or they're unsure about something. And, you know, we're trying to do things differently. We're not a huge bureaucracy. And we look for ways, okay, you know, is there a way that we can make an exception or bend the rules or that kind of thing? And we want to keep the human component. You know, we're trying to be I don't know, many of you probably are aware of, you know, literature around systems of white supremacy and how it shows up in institutions and organizations. And a big part of that is things like bureaucracy for its own sake. And we're really trying to get away from that as a fund and differentiate ourselves from existing funding institutions that are out there. What is my time like? 2 minutes? Oh my goodness, okay. So this $20 million vision, actually, this is where the rubber meets the road. What does it look like? We're not naive. We know that $20 million in terms of production is not going to go a long way. So we recognize what our role could potentially be in the larger ecosystem. We're working side by side with other organizations to assist with change within the larger funding institutions. They can do the bigger money projects as they change. But what we've identified is 4 key areas of major gaps for Black and racialized creators. So calling card program for emerging creators, a development fund, completion top-up fund, and the issue of marketing and discoverability, which is something that other groups like Real World have identified as issues in terms of getting people out there. Let's see here. All right, so we know that much existing screen-based funding requires a broadcast distribution trigger. The triggers are just one example of systemic barriers, especially in considering who has benefited from their support. We know that funding institutions often advise BIPOC filmmakers to work with established producers in order to get their projects financed. We know that larger institutions at the same time are coming to understand the important and unique role that can be played by FUBU Fund. The mandates of Heritage, CRTC, and other institutions to support Black and racialized creators are the result of decades of advocacy by our communities, and we cannot afford to lose the momentum of recent years. So further to the C11 stuff that Kadon was talking about, we're participating actively in the process of trying to ensure that within the new contribution framework of the CRTC's regulations, that currently 80% of the mandated funding that is channeled back into the system to support the creation of Canadian content, 80% of that goes to CMF, and then the other 20% goes to what is called Certified Independent Production Funds. We were recently recertified as one of those. However, the way that the Act is right now, that is discretionary in terms of which production fund the broadcaster needs to put it to. So we recognize that structurally, the big win for us would be to be identified before, like within that 80%, whether it's 80% or whatever the new regime looks like, that we specifically, CISF, specifically be named alongside CMF, and likely it will also be the Indigenous Screen Office as a funder representing sovereign interests. For these three institutions to be named as being mandated to receive some of that funding before it goes discretionary. That is something that is going to allow for sustained funding of substance that is reliable. It will be a game changer for our organizations and for our communities. Let's see here. So in closing, I'm going to say Canadian BIPOC creators are entitled to full and equitable access to funding across the sector. The sector benefits because we're going to ensure that the sector stays relevant. Black and racialized voices are essential to Canadian culture and the projection of our values at home and abroad. The solutions to the film and television industry's systemic racism need to come from the people who are being affected by it. And finally, please sign up for our socials, stay in touch, and I'm accessible. I'm going to be around all weekend, and I welcome just continuing the conversation with you. And we need the help of everybody in this room to get the word about CISF and impress upon any of your industry contacts. In fact, if you are kind of so inclined, your MPs, I'm going to be making a pre-budget submission that, we need to get involved in policy and that kind of thing. We have to start counting ourselves in to these processes. And I guess that's it.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much to Sally, Kadon, and Tanya for showing us just, scratching the surface of some of the amazing work that all of your organizations do and that each of you personally do. A lot of this is really hard work. It is really challenging, and hopefully everyone in this room, whether you are a policy wonk and have been aware of these organizations and these kind of policy conversations, or you're new to it, hopefully it was illuminating and really emphasizes the importance of everyone really being aware together, singing in the choir, hitting the same notes, and advocating as a collective. And for some of you on a surface level, just appreciating how amazing these programs are and how much work and how much depth there is. Tanya said something in the panel preceding this is starting new things is great. The irony is not lost on us, the EXNW. But starting new things is great, and people are often tempted to just start from scratch because of impatience or like a lack of visibility or awareness about existing work. So let's not make that mistake, and let's reach out and connect with each other. So thank you again, and we look forward to hearing next year how the CRTC hearings are going, and we'll probably have a federal election soon. So, that'll all be fun stuff. But please stay involved in these discussions. It's really, really important.